Hello, man. Always great to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast. Thank you for sharing this information. Pastor Andrew is here. I love you and pray for you as men. You're always on my heart, and we are committed at Encounter to making sure we build great and strong men so that society can be better, so that women and children are blessed and they're living in environments of absolute bliss. Why? Because men are better. Whenever men are better, society is better. So today I'm going to be dealing with something so sensitive to a man, and that is dealing with loneliness. I can hear men quiet. Dealing with loneliness. How do we deal with loneliness? One of the greatest pain men are facing as I speak right now is loneliness. In fact, some statistics have told us that 6 out of 10 men are lonely. Very, very lonely. Men are disengaged. Men have no relationships. Men are struggling to keep a relationship. Men are emotionally disengaged. They are not engaged at all. Men are isolated. And this is not an isolation of prayer. This is an isolation that men are going through because of life. So you find that most men have no friends, have nothing to do with life. They're emotionally not present. And so this loneliness has caused a lot of pain, but also this is what is happening. The statistics from developed countries are telling us men are higher chances of committing suicide. Men are suicidal. Men are having mental health at a highest level. Why? Because men are lonely. They are very isolated from life. And as I speak right now as a man, I know that you're feeling it. You're thinking, yeah, that is true. And this loneliness is continuing, contrary to the ladies. Ladies are having parties left and right. Ladies are enjoying themselves. They're saying, let me go out. In fact, my wife will always tells me, I have this meeting here. I'm going to meet this person. What are you guys going to do? We're just going to catch up. And that's the world of the ladies. But our world, I have seen men drowning in isolation. I've seen men drowning in what should I do? Pastor, I am so lonely. Men are not accountable. And this lack of accountability is because men are absolutely lonely. They're lonely at their workplace. They're lonely in their homes. Men are lonely with their friends. Even when they have their friends, they're what? Lonely. And let me tell you, show me a man who is lonely and I'll show you a man who is hurting. So today I want to look at 2 things that will help us understand the kind of loneliness I'm talking about. 2 areas. Number 1, men cannot express deeply their feelings. That's the first thing. Men cannot express deeply what their feelings. You see, we've grown up in society that tells us, be a man. Men don't cry. Why are you crying? In fact, I love watching fathers with their young sons. When the young man falls and starts crying, why are you crying? But the young man has fallen. He's feeling pain. Say, no. Men don't cry. So men they don't know how to express those deep feelings. Then people will see if you're emotional. When a man becomes emotional, people will say, you're acting like what? A woman. Meaning women have emotions and can express them, but for us as men, we can't express these deep emotions. No one wants to see you expressing them and opening up. In fact, you'll hear a statement, your emotions, when you express your emotions, those deep emotions, it's equivalent to weakness. You'll hear people saying, you're a weak man. Why? Because you have expressed your what? Your emotions. You are told to keep it in. So even when things are not going well, men don't understand how do we express our deep emotions. So those emotions, we have emotions like happiness. Women struggle to know, is my husband happy? Is he not happy? So we don't know how to express happiness. We don't know how to express sadness. I've hardly found a man who has said, you know what, I am sad. We don't know how to express worry. So you find that a man doesn't know how to express worry. So when he's worried, he doesn't know what to do. Men don't know how to express fear. All those that I'm describing are emotions. And how do we express those emotions? How do you express fear as a man? So what you do is you keep it in. You keep it in. When you are mad, how do you express those feelings? So the first one we want to look at is men are struggling to express their emotions. Now, the second thing is men are struggling in the area of forming meaningful connections. Meaningful connections. So one has to do with expressing your deep emotions, but the second one has to do with forming meaningful connections. I can tell you when we're having our discipleship class for the men, I asked the men, okay, tell me your closest 3 friends. And the class went quiet. I said, okay, now tell me just one person who is very close to you. Meaningful connections. Just tell me one. And you could hardly get men to tell you. And so I asked them, but you're always with other men around. I said, yes, Pastor, we are always with other men. But those men, we talk about football, we talk about politics, we talk about golf, we talk about what things we love and eat and all that. We're just having fun. Those relationships are not meaningful. They're shallow relationships. So men are struggling to make such relationships. Because when we talk about meaningful relationships, we're talking about a relationship where someone is there for you. He knows what you're going through. We're talking about that relationship where you can tell them, man, I am broke. Where you can tell them, man, sex between me and my wife is not working out. You are able to say that. You are able to tell them, you know what? Man, I'm dying. The loans are choking me up. You are able to tell them, I'm struggling to raise my daughter or to raise my son. Such kind of relationship. Telling them, you know what? I'm lustful. Last week I was having lustful thoughts. Those are deep connections, meaningful connections. So men are struggling in those areas and hence they are lonely. The area of expressing your emotions, those deep emotions, and the area of forming meaningful relationships. So let's go back to our motto. This podcast about building great men, our motto is Christ. Let's look at Christ. What did Christ model in this area? Was Christ lonely? No, he was not. Now we see something about Christ and it amazes me. He chooses the 12 disciples, right? We all know he chooses the 12 disciples. After choosing the 12 disciples, then he does something else. So those 12 guys were his buddies. They were doing life together. They would go preach together. So as a man, who are your 12? Some close people around you, like 12 that are close to you. But even on those 12, we see something under connecting. We see something happening with Christ. He had 3. Now, those 3 were the inner circle. Those are guys that he was chilling out with. Those are the guys who knew the deep things that were going on. When Christ was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he had those 3. He had Peter, he had John, he had James. Peter, John, and James. So those 3 were close to him. When the transfiguration, they were there. They were watching him being taken to heaven. They were there with him. So those big events in Jesus' life, he had Peter, he had John, he had James. They were always around him. Those were his gang. And these were people that he believed in and they believed in him. They were always around him. So as a man, we need to be having at least 3 of them. So there's a 12, but there's a 3. But even on the 3, he had a 1. So as a man, I'm asking you these questions. Who are your 3? But Jesus also had a 1. He had a John. Very, very close. And what amazes me about John and Jesus, how their relationship was so tight. It was like David and Nathan, and Jonathan, sorry. So what amazes me about the relationship of Jesus and John is this. In the darkest time of Jesus, while Jesus was at the cross, guess who was there? The mother was there. The earthly mother of Jesus was there. The father was not there. You remember men missing out on the most important things? Joseph was not there when Jesus was being crucified. He missed out on one of the key moments. But you know who was there? John was there. In fact, the last instructions Jesus gives before his death when he was at a cross, he spoke to John. He says, look at this woman. Take care of her. The question I have for you as a man, who is your John? Because we're dealing with loneliness. Expression of your emotions and forming meaningful, connecting relationships. So who is your John? And this is what I ask all the men in our class. Who is your John? I have my John. I have my 3 men. I have 12. In fact, now I have quite great men that I connect with. Because a man, if you're not connecting with other men, you'll not be held accountable and you are a recipe for disaster. So who is your John? Who is that guy that you know if I'm in trouble? If I'm in trouble, I will run. I can tell you when I'm leaving my home, if I'm traveling and I'm not around for many days, I have a man that I'll tell. If my wife had a challenge with me, he would not wait for church leaders to see it and all that. No. He'll pick up the phone and call a certain man. And call up some men. And they would show up. They would show up. And every time they know I'm in trouble, they show up. Every time we're celebrating, they will show up. If I was in trouble now, they would show up. I have a John who will show up at whatever cost. Whatever cost. I'll spend some Christmases with him. I know his children. They can spend time at my house. They can even sleep at my house. He can enter my bedroom. He knows everything. He knows when I'm broke. He knows when I'm mad. He knows when I'm pissed. I have him. Do you have him? Now, how do we get that John? Because now that's the big question. How as men do we build a John? How do we build a Peter and James? How do we build the 12? How do we do it as men? A couple of things I want to suggest for you as some things you need to consider. Number 1, relationships take time. So invest time. There's a lie that we have believed as men, we have no time. No. As a teacher of leadership, I tell men, we create time for what is important. There's no relationship that will ever develop without giving it time. In fact, not even relationship. Nothing worth in this world happens without time. We're here on this podcast, it's time. So what makes you think you'll break the cycle of loneliness without investing time in creating meaningful relationship, in making sure you run after? And so I said, create time to run after a man. You have to run after a man. Or run after Peter, John. Run after them. And I know your ego sometimes gets the best of you. You say, why do I run? Why do I run to Jeff? Why do I run to Wilson? No, run to them and invest your time. I can tell you, my John, I run. My Peter, I run. The men I disciple at Encounter, when they call me, I run. When Gusta is in a problem, I will run. When John is in a problem, I will run. When my pastors, I will run for them. We create time and run there. So the first thing I want you to do, create the time and run after man. Run. Because the time we spend on social media, guys, let's be honest. The time we spend on X, the time we spend on WhatsApp and all that, that time we can actually spend it on pursuing a certain relationship by investing time on it. The second thing we can do is this: choose to be vulnerable. Choose to be vulnerable. I'm using the word a choice. As a man, you have to choose to open up to the deepest things in your life. Because no one will ever force you. But when you make that choice to be vulnerable, choose to do it when you have run after that man or those men. So choose to be vulnerable. That is very, very important. Because if you don't choose to do that, no one will ever force you. You see, one of the things I have seen when it comes to choosing to be vulnerable, men struggle with two main fears: the fear of rejection and the fear of judgment. Let me say that again. Men struggle with the fear of rejection and the fear of judgment. So you're thinking, oh, Pastor, you're saying to be vulnerable before another man or other men. They will judge me. They may reject me because I want to keep up appearance. And so when we live with those fears, what happens is we start living a double life. You find that you are different at work, you are different at home, you are different with your friends. And that's not the kind of man we want. But when you choose to be vulnerable, you will tell that man whatever you're going through. You'll tell him the good, the bad, the ugly. And then you'll pray together. And then you will encourage each other. And you will sharpen one another. And you'll be in that space where you feel a load has been lifted. You laugh together. You cry together. So when I'm talking about my John, those are the things we do. We sit and talk. And I've had many difficult moments I've gone through. Many difficult moments I've gone through. But we would sit and talk almost weekly. We would sit 3-4 times and talk till midnight. Just talk through things and laugh and pray and do that. I chose to be vulnerable. So I don't want you to allow the fear of rejection and the fear of judgment to stop you from being vulnerable. Go after that relationship. The third thing we can do is join a group of men. Join a group of men. And whenever I tell this to men, they say, but which group is that? I'll just give you simple guidelines on joining. Join a group of men. Come join Encounter. Join the group of men at Encounter. But also join a group of men that share the same values, that you believe in the same values, you believe in the same God, such kind of men. Because if you don't have shared values, a common thing that unites you, it simply means part 2 we talked about, the vulnerability will not happen. So choose a group of men that have similar values, similar principles, and then start pursuing that. All this will happen if you make that choice. So what choice do I want you to make? Pursue that relationship, because relationships take time and invest time. Choose to be vulnerable. And also join a group. Go to your pastor and say, Pastor, can we do life together? I know pastors struggle to disciple men, but if you're a pastor out there, we can start somewhere and just disciple and make sure that we create this relationship where we kill this whole demon called loneliness. So I want to conclude by just wrapping up everything. We said loneliness is at an increase. Men are disengaged, lonely, lack of accountability. We also say that this is manifested in 2 areas. We don't know how to express our deepest emotions, but also we don't know how to form meaningful connections. And then we looked at our model Jesus, how he does it and how he did it. Then finally we got some nuggets on how can I start forming this relationship? How can I start sharing the deepest thing? Pursue those relationships. They'll take time. Choose to be vulnerable and join a group of men. Start doing life. With that, I know I've asked very many questions. I want to leave you some questions to reflect on. Number 1, I want you to evaluate, what kind of relationships do I have? Are they just football, fish, and all that. And those things are good, but does it just stop there? Are they shallow relationships? Are they deep relationships? Can you rely on them? Number 2, what can I do to be more vulnerable? What are those areas in my life that I don't like sharing? Start sharing them. For some of you, it may be very lonely, and you need to start by just pursuing a relationship. Pursue 1, 2, 3 relationships. And the word pursue means pursue. Say, no, I'm a man, he will follow me up. No, pursue. Pursue that. The way you pursue that business deal, pursue that relationship. Because it will not come on a silver platter. Pursue it. Pursue it. Pursue it. It will take your time, it will take your energy, it will take your money, but pursue it. I want to tell you as a man, it's worth it. It's worth it. Because good things don't come easy. It's worth it. Pursue it. They may reject you, they may what? Pursue it. Relentlessly pursue it. Why? Because your future belongs to it. You don't want to be a lonely man. If you're already lonely, which is 60% of you watching are already lonely, you don't want to stay lonely. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll be doing a podcast, a discussion about this with Wilson Chigundu. I'm excited about that. It will be so great. So share with fellow men so that we can connect again in our discussion on dealing with loneliness. Continue following us on Twitter, on our social media platforms, on our website. We love you. We're proud of you. We are for you, man. We want to continue putting energy in you as a man. We believe in you. So from us to you, bye-bye.